I'm going to handle 19 of the most common sales objections, starting with, I just want to think about it. So I'm going to teach you the same thing I would teach my own $30 million a year sales team. And if you want access to this document, it's completely free. Just comment objections below. We'll just send it to you. So let's say the prospect says they want to think about it. So more specifically, let's say they say, hey, this sounds great. Can you send this over to me so I can think about it? I'll get back to you next week. So here's what you would say. No problem. All right. So we always start with like a diffusing phrase, no problem, not an issue at all. No problem, pause. Okay. We want to diffuse the pressure. Most prospects are used to like rebuttals, which puts their guard up. You always start with no problem. Then I say, hey, before we get into the app, just so I can stay organized on my end, like, how do you feel? Like, we covered X, Y, and Z in terms of our process. Do you feel like this is what you need to be able to get to whatever their outcome was? So it's like, hey, how do you feel? You mentioned you want to scale your business to 100 grand a month. We covered our 4-step process in terms of implementing the right systems of X, Y, and Z. Do you feel like this is 100% what you need and this is going to work to be able to get you there, right? So we want to give a very definitive, strong tie down. Now, the reason we do that is we want to root out what the real specific objection is or isolate that this is the real objection. You'll see this in the training. We're going to do this like again and again and again. This is why I started with this objection, is this framework is so important, okay? Now, anytime you do a tie down, if you get some, like what you're trying to do is see if they're 100% certain that this is the right thing, now is the right time. So to kind of digress a little bit, essentially there's 3 main buckets of objections. There's uncertainty-based, imagine that at the top. Then there's partner, spouse, basically I call it support objections. So anytime they're deferring authority to somebody outside of the call. Then there's financial objections. Now, the way I define financial objections is not, oh, it's too expensive, I just don't feel like it's worth it. That's actually uncertainty. It's actual financial logistics. And so imagine uncertainty at the top of the pyramid and these two at the bottom. It's because when you can get them totally bought in that this is going to work and it's 100% what they want to do and they're 100% certain that this is the right thing, now is the right time, the other two, support-based and financial, just become logistics that we have to navigate. They're not real objections. They're just logistics. All of the real objections, which is uncertainty-based objections, which as you can see here, which we're going to cover first, all come down here. So the reason we want to do this tie down is the first thing we always want to do whenever we get an objection, no matter what it is see if they're actually sold on a product, right? And our method of getting them to the result, right? So getting them sold and closing them or enrolling them or whatever are 2 different things. Closing is actually getting them to process the payment. Getting them sold just means that they believe internally, I 100% want to do this. Like I'm really, literally sold on this, okay? So that's why we ask this question. Now, if you get a wishy-washy response, anytime you ask this, you need to call it out. So for instance, if you're like, hey, do you 100% believe it's going to work? And do you feel like this is what you need to get to outcome? Okay? And they're like, well, I think so. You need to kind of say like, I think so. Like, look, like what's really going on? What's keeping you from being less than 100% certain you feel like this is really going to work? Let's just have an honest conversation. Like, so you see how you can call it out. So I said, if you get the wishy-washiness, double down, right? Hey, what I'm trying to really understand is, do you think this is 100% going to work for you? And do you 100% want to do it? Okay, so I use that 100% in very strong definitive language because what I'm really trying to do is essentially root out any uncertainty. Okay, which is why I go so strong here, because it'll root out any specifics or concerns they've not brought up to me yet. All right, so there's only 2 options from here. Is number 1, they're going to be wishy-washy or vague in terms of their concerns, or they're going to be like, no, I really want to do it. I just want to sleep on it. So when you isolate out, I want to think about it objection, it actually turns into, I want to sleep about it. Or sorry, I want to sleep on it for 24 hours. Okay. Anything else is going to be, the reason we go so hard here is to actually see what the specific concern is. And then what happens is then we can address whatever that specific concern is through what we got through the tie down. So if we get number 1 here, we proceed below. And so you would say like, got it. So just so I can say where it is on my end, what's keeping you from being less than 100% certain this is going to work for you? We kind of already covered that. All right. So what you want to do is obviously shift the conversation from vague to specific. As you'll see, that's another pattern of what we're going to do in every step of this training here is shift it from vague to specific, vague to specific. So vague is, I just want to think about it. I need some space, etc. You want to shift that to specific, which I just need a day to sleep on it, is specific. I'm afraid it's not going to work because of X, Y, and Z. I got burned before. Financially, I'm in a really tight spot. Those all become more specific. And then as you'll see later in the training, there's tons of different ways we can handle that, okay? So now, oftentimes what you can do is if they do really want to do it and they just want to sleep on it, it pivots to this. So you'll see how this works. So again, If they came and just said, hey, I really want to do this, I want to sleep on it, you would still do that double tie down. But let's just say you're picking up from I want to think about it. So with that, what you're going to do is after they tell you, hey, I want to sleep on it, or they tell you, hey, no, I really want to do it, I just want to sleep on it, you say, gotcha, no problem at all, totally get that. So if I heard you correctly, you 100% want to move forward. You just want to take a pause so you don't feel completely rushed. Is that correct? They're like, yeah, exactly. Okay, great. So just to be clear, when we talk tomorrow, if you wake up tomorrow feeling the same exact way you feel right now, then we're 100% moving forward over processing payment. So you see how now we have a new objection, we isolated it, the new double tie down. So only two things can happen from here. Number one is they break the tie down to give you a specific concern, okay? Because you see how this is so strong. When it's very strong like that, it forces out the concern. And that's actually what I want. And so I want to force out the concern. Maybe they don't think it's going to work, et cetera. Oh, no, I'm going to need more time. Okay, why do you need more time? Okay, what's keeping you from being less than 100% certain? Then we can actually get a specific thing. Now, oftentimes with a sleep on it, they're going to say yes, okay? In that case, what we would do is sometimes we could deposit close or trial close. That's if the prospect's a little bit more decisive. Or if you feel like, oh man, this is somebody a little bit more feminine energy, we do need to follow up tomorrow, you can follow up with them 24 hours. Now, I do want to point out with this framework, what I did here is I actually have a presupposition. Before I even ask to schedule a follow-up tomorrow, I take them at the word literally that they want to sleep on it, and I assume the 24-hour follow-up. So you see how I say here, hey, so to be clear, when we talk tomorrow, right, I haven't even scheduled the follow-up yet, but I already anchor in that we're going to talk tomorrow. And you wake up feeling the same exact way you feel right now, we're 100% moving forward to processing payment. And then that way, even if they can't talk tomorrow, the starting point of the negotiation of when we're going to have the follow-up is tomorrow. What happens is a lot of salespeople will be like, well, when do you want to follow up? And the prospect just defaults to same time next week. And then you got to start with that endpoint and move it forward. So that's generally not good.
Real quick, and then we'll get back to the video. If you need help with any of these three things, either installing a lead acquisition internally in your business, you need new sales reps, and you want sales reps recruited done for you, and also get the sales consulting and sales management help that comes with that, or if you just want overall business strategies of how you can scale to 8 figures or beyond, go to the link in the description, click that link, check out the video, and then book a call with our team. We'd love to help you with any of those three things. Now back to the video.
All right, what if it doesn't work? So this will usually come up after you kind of hit on like I want to think about it or I want to do research. Like this is usually something that's more specific that comes up after one of the vague ones. So here's how you would handle that. Hey, I hear you. I can appreciate that. Just so I can stay organized on my end. What you're saying is, despite X, Y, and Z case studies and X, Y, and Z client success rate, you're worried you're going to be the small percentage that like this doesn't work for, right? Haha, okay, look, no worries. I get that. Can I ask you on this question? If you come in and do this, are you number one, going to 100% put in the work? And number two, when you run into a problem or a challenge, which you are going to, that's what happens when you're building a business. Are you going to raise your hand and reach out for help or bury your head in the sand and just disappear? Also kind of funny, right? Well, they're like, look, I'm going to raise my hand when I get help. I'm going to put in the work. Gotcha. Well, look, if we have an X% success rate and you're 100% going to work and you promise me you're going to raise your hand when you need help, then tell me like, why wouldn't this work for you? Okay. So you kind of just end up throwing it back at them. All right. So 2 outcomes. They don't know what you perceive below, or they're going to give you a real objection. All right. Now, if they don't know, they're like, a lot of times when you throw it back at them here, what's going to happen is they're going to get a little stuck. They're going to be like, yeah, I just don't know. I don't know. Like, it's just hard for me to make a decision. And what you want to do here is when they get stuck, it really is actually that they're dealing with fear and nervousness. And so you want to give them a label of their objection. The way you do that is you say, hey, look, do you just think it's a little bit of nerves? And what's really great about this is once, as you'll see later in the training, I will try to do that very often because once I can get them, this is more in a B2C context. Like obviously, you're not going to be selling in a $100 million a year business and you're going to be dealing with the guy having a little bit of nerves, right? But in a B2C context, once I can give him to claim that, yeah, I'm just a little nervous, as you'll see, because we'll handle that objection specifically later, 100% of the time I'm going to close them, okay? I always can overcome nerves because now I can frame it into a coaching situation. You'll see how that works later. So once you kind of get the prospect stuck a little bit, they're kind of like, they don't know why they can't move forward. You give them the objection of, oh yeah, I'm just nervous, right? So you just suggest it for them. All right, let's move on to I need to do a little research. Okay, so if you get this, I'm just going to be honest. This one is almost always you messed up in the sales process in the beginning. I mean, if they really want to do more research, it's kind of like they just thought you didn't do a good job. They don't understand what you do, or like they just want to get off the call, or they don't trust you. Like most times, if they just do want some space, it's more of a I need to sleep on it or I need to take the weekend. That's kind of a realistic time objection, but research is usually you messed up the call. But nevertheless, let's go through how I handle it. Hey, I need to do research. You say, hey, no problem at all. Happy for you to do that. Just so I can say, organizing it clarity on my end, what's keeping you from being less than 100% certain that this is going to help you get to X, Y, and Z outcome. Okay. So as you can see here, what I want to do with this objection is just assume automatically they don't think it's going to work. Right. Which is why I say, what's keeping you from being less than 100% certain that this is going to work, basically. Okay. So I didn't take it at face value. I actually took it as, oh, okay, you don't think it's going to work. No problem. I'm happy to do research, but I'm curious, why don't you think it's going to work? Because otherwise, why would you don't want to do research? So there's only two things they can do here, right? You're going to see this as a pattern. They give you a specific objection. And remember, we always want to take vague to the specific. I want to do research is vague. I don't think this is going to work because of X, Y, and Z reason. I used an agency before in the past and it didn't work, etc. That's specific. We can then handle that. And then usually a lot of times if they give you something specific, this objection becomes irrelevant. You sidestep it completely. You handle that one, then loop back to the close. Now, if they get you kind of stumped here and they're just like, no, I want to do more research, then what you want to do is say, got it. So basically what I'm understanding is you 100% think this is going to work and you want to move forward after you do a little bit of research. Okay? So again, this is a pretty strong tie down. I'm kind of trying them to get them to say no, because when I get them to say no, it will give me the real objection. You see how that works, okay? But you're going to see this come up 100 times. So again, two options here is they're unlikely going to say yes. But if they do, okay, so now you're going to get the specific objection. But for whatever reason, if they just kind of meander on and they say yes, you would say that's good to hear. So when you say research, what were you hoping to specifically find out more about? All right. So now, again, see, I'm trying to get to a specific objection. Right? A lot of times here, what's going to come up is the due diligence objection, which we're going to cover next. That's a little bit more like, I just don't trust you. I need to do my due diligence. Now, if they keep saying nothing and just perusing, oh, nothing specifically, they're just trying to get off the call. You lost this deal a long time ago. Okay? So now, if it is number two, they just keep perusing and they stay stuck here, what you would want to say is, hey, can I be honest with you for a second? Earlier, you said you're 100% certain this is what you need to be able to get to X, Y, and Z outcome after you do a little bit of research. But when I ask you, like, what do you specifically want to find out more about? You say nothing in particular. You just want to do research. So let me be clear. Like, I'm totally fine with letting you do research, number one. You don't need to make a decision right now. I'm totally fine with that. I'm also totally fine with, like, you're not interested in this at all. Okay? But one of my core values is just transparency and honesty. And so I just want to have an honest conversation. And at this point, I just can't help but feeling like you're just really not that interested in this, which is okay. And maybe you want to circle back to that in 6 to 12 months. Or like, what's really going on? Okay? So some version of this call out is like your last ditch effort, right? So this might prompt an honest conversation, or you could just move on. You don't schedule a follow-up. You don't book another one in your calendar. You're all good. Okay? Just make sure you say it empathetically. If your intention really here should be to have a truly honest conversation. It's not necessarily confrontational. Now, somewhere along these tie downs with I need to do more research, most likely what happens is you get into a due diligence. I just found out about you guys. Like you ask why, you isolate that I want to do research and they're like, well, yeah, I do really want to do it, but I just found out about you guys, blah, 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 blah. So usually this is where I want to do research falls into. So let's go into how to handle this. So you would say, hey, I totally get it. And no problem with taking the time to do some research on us. Like that's totally fine. Just so I can be clear on my end, that aside, how do you feel about the process? Do you feel like what we outlined is 100% what you need to get to the outcome? Okay, so you again see like, I go for a strong tie down here. Now, what you don't want to do with any of these tie downs is you don't want to be like, yeah, so like, yeah, no problem. But, before we get into that, how do you feel? Like, do you feel like it's what you need? It's like, if you ask it like a total, wimp, they're gonna be like, yeah, I just need to do this. You need to like kind of get in their face a little bit. It's like, gotcha, totally fine with that. That aside, do you feel like this is at 100% going to work for you? And that as long as everything I said checks out, you're 100% moving forward. You see how like the way they would respond to that, they almost like, they're either going to tell me yes, which means they are serious, or they're going to hesitate and I'm going to call them out, or they're going to tell me no. A lot of times what you want to watch for is the hesitation, because you'll see the incongruence. They're like, I kind of want to tell this guy what he wants to hear, but I don't want to lie. That's when you call it out. So you see how, and once we call it out, we'll always get the specific objection. So before we take anything at face value, that's why these tie downs are so important. I know I'm hammering that, but it is key. So again, you're going to ask this. It's going to result in a yes, a no, or a wishy-washy. A wishy-washy is a no. You call that out, you get the specific objection. Now, let's just assume, because anytime they give a wishy-washy or you call it out, again, what's going to happen is you're going to get a specific concern. They're going to be like, well, like I tried this in the past. It didn't work. Oh, I just don't think ads are going to work. They're going to give you something that you can handle that's more logistic. So we don't have to script out or cover any of that. You just got to use your common sense. So what we're going to do is move on and consider that they are like, no, like, yeah, I really want to do it. It looks great. So then you do the double tie down. So basically you're 100% ready to move forward. You just want to do some due diligence to make sure that everything I told you on this call is 100% true and there's no red flags. But as long as everything I told you lines up with what else you find out on the internet, you're 100% good to go to move forward. So you see how, like, again, I hit him with that again. It's going to isolate out anything that is not, anything that is not this isolated objection. So again, two options here. Again, you'll get specific, or they say yes, you proceed below. Now, once you have it isolated just to the fact that they want to look at case studies or reviews or whatever, say, no problem. I can help you probably speed up that research process. What do you specifically want to see? Reviews, case studies, information videos. Based on that, I can prepare something for you and send that over. Now, once you get the specifics of that, you kind of have two options. What you could do, or at least attempt to do, is be like, hey, do you mind if I walk you through one or two of those things right now? I'd actually like to explain to you some of the case studies right now. And then if it's somebody who's a little bit more definitive, masculine, etc., you can close them right then on the call after you show them the proof and kind of be like, look, like, here's, especially a company like ours, we have thousands of positive reviews, hundreds and hundreds of case studies. It's kind of like, look, like, do you really need to do research? Like, do you think all of this is fake? Like, here's like 5 people, bam, 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 who are just like you and got the result that you're after. So like, what are we really waiting for here? Like, you want to do this. Like, what's really going on? Like, you can challenge them. Now, if it's somebody a little bit more feminine, give them 24 hours. Okay. So you kind of need to just know which way to take that. All right. Now, if they want to speak with one of your clients, obviously in certain companies, if you could do this, just do it. Like, there's nothing wrong with creating a champion for a company and then you get a quick referral bonus, for the client if they talk with somebody. And for higher end enterprise stuff, that could be a totally fine thing. But, obviously if you're like a business selling fitness or something and you're doing a massive transaction volume, it's a little bit impractical, which is really all you need to do to communicate to the prospect. It's like, like, this is a little impractical based on our situation. So here's how this would work. So they say, I want to speak to one of your clients. You would say, got it. Hey, let's cover that in just a second. But just from clarity, aside from that, how do you feel? Do you feel like this is 100% what you need to outcome and that you 100% want to do it? Okay. Same thing. Same reason we do it. Okay. I'm not going to dig into that for the 100th time. Prospect says, yeah, as long as I can speak to a client, I 100% want to move forward. Got it. So theoretically speaking, if you spoke to one of our clients and they validated everything that I told you so far, you're basically good to go. We're processing payment. All right. So again, you either get a specific objection here or they say yes and we proceed below. Now, if it's really only truly they just need to speak to a client, which a lot of times, I'm just going to let you know, it's not. The reason we do these tie downs is because oftentimes they're going to give you something specific. And now instead of having to like reframe this whole thing, we'll just handle the real thing and then we'll just forget this ever even happened. I won't even have to handle it. Okay. But let's say this truly is the only thing standing in the way. So you would say, got it. Well, here's our policy regarding that. See, I don't make it a me thing. If I'm the rep, I'm going to be like, it's company policy. There's nothing I can do. All right. Here's our policy regarding that. I totally get you want to do it. The way our policy works in this company is, look, we have 100 people plus reaching out every single month, trying to become a client. So I'm not saying you're wrong at all to ask for that. And I can understand why you want it. In our position, however, with that many people reaching out, it wouldn't be appropriate, professional, or even realistic to fill our clients' calendars with the people who are just wanting to think about joining our program, many of which are not even going to be serious to begin with, especially when our clients are wealthy business owners. They charge $1,000 to $5,000 for an hour of their time. So That would be completely off the table, but it's the exact reason why we have over 500 case studies or assets or whatever you have that I can send to you, especially a section of them that are just like you that you can dig into, or I even can cover with you. So what I want to do is send those over to you so you can actually go through them. So what I want to know is there a specific type of case study you were looking for? And if so, I can build a list for you of some people to go through ASAP, okay? So you want to say something like that to where, but basically the key points of this is you explain, hey, you're not wrong for wanting this. Here's our policy. In our position, this is just simply our situation. So therefore, and it's very key you say this phrase, that's completely off the table, all right? You have to just definitively say that. If you do this a lot of reps, they're like on their back foot, kind of trying to explain it, but they're also nervous and they just sound so weak. That's when the prospect really kind of gets skeptical. If you just do one of these, it's completely off the table. But we can't do that. But what we can do is, and then you just get into the solution. Almost 99% of the time, they're just like, sure. Because they're not going to challenge it because they know at the end of the day, it's not going to happen. Again, it's completely off the table. So another thing here is if you have somebody that's not as risk adverse, you can do a 7-day trial close, which removes the risk completely. And then you can just close them on the spot. You know, like this is for certain people who are decisive. Sometimes it's like B2C programs. It's like, look, like, why don't you just come in for 7 days? You'll be able to interact with all the clients in the community. And then if you don't like it after your onboarding call, we'll just refund you. Most people will never refund, especially when you make it. It's like you put a money where your mouth is offering that strong like that. They won't refund. And if they do, they never would have bought anyways. Okay, so let's move on to I don't have time to implement. So the prospect would say here, hey, this sounds great. I want to do it in 2 months when I have the time. But other words, it sounds great. You would say, yeah, no problem. Totally get that. Just so I can be clear on my end, you 100% believe that it's going to work. This is what you want to do. It's just a matter of you want to do it in 2 months. They're going to be like, yeah, got it. So you mentioned 2 months, like what would be your exact start date? Right? You always want to pin this down, okay? Because the next question you're going to ask is, let's say they say, oh, it's May 3rd. Gotcha. So if we were speaking on May 3rd and May 3rd was right now, you'd be 100% moving forward, we'd be processing payment. Now, let's say they say yes, okay? So again, those are pretty strong, sniff out a real objection, or you proceed. Now, if it truly is that I don't have time objection, I want to kind of teach you the way to think about it because it's really not the scripting. You just got to think about what's going on here. So obviously, if you're at this part of the call and they're like, I don't have the time, if this is like a business owner, or it doesn't really matter if it's a business owner, it could be somebody with a personal problem, weight loss, etc. Like they've mentioned that X, Y, and Z problem, whatever reason they're on the call, is extremely important to fix. In a business standpoint, it's oftentimes the number one constraint in their company. So let's say that a business owner comes on, they want help with lead generation. You can help with lead generation. So they come on and basically identify that the number one constraint in their business is lead generation. Now, throughout your sales process, you should get them sold and also tie them down that, like we just did, that your solution is 100% what they believe they need to do to fix the lead generation. All right? So if those two things are true, then as a business owner, what we want to do is spend our time on where the most constraints are in the business. And so if both those two things are true is the only thing, the top priority of really where you should spend your time is this. So if not now, when? Okay, you could actually handle the objection just by explaining what I just explained. It's a little different than how I wrote it out, but that's kind of the idea is, okay, this is the number one problem in your business and the number one constraint. As a business owner, you should be focusing all your time on the number one constraint. Like we hear Alex Hormozi say that all the time. And then if we've also identified that this is the number one thing you think that you need to do to fix the problem, then what else would you spend your time on other than this? You see how that works? That's kind of the thought process here. If you just have the thought process, it doesn't matter what the scripting is, you'll nail this. That's how you handle it after you isolate it. So my example, I basically just kind of outlined that. I'm like, look, so you've already mentioned the number one problem in your business is lead generation, right? And you also mentioned that's probably the main constraint in your business where you need to spend the most time. And then finally, you also mentioned out of all the solutions you looked into, this is what you feel like is the best path forward of fixing the problem. So let me ask you a question, like how many hours do you work a week? Great. Well, I'm not asking you to work more hours. I'm asking you to direct those hours into the number one constraint in your business. And then using our solution, that'll actually take you less time than it would to do it yourself. But like, if you're going to grow your business, why would you not focus on this now? Like, if not now, when? This is the biggest priority. So I'm not trying to make you feel bad about it. But I am trying to realign you in the sense, like, I don't know why you wouldn't want to focus on this now. Like, we're just kind of delaying the inevitable, or is something else going on? So that's kind of essentially how we would handle this here. And now an additional option you could do, and you can use this close for a variety of different reasons, is called circumstances versus vision. So you can actually use this for a variety of different closes. But it goes to something along the lines of like, hey, look, can I tell you what I'm seeing here? The biggest problem in your business is lead generation, okay? Or whatever their problem is in their life or their business. And your biggest bottleneck to solving it is time. But the reason you don't have time in your business is because of lack of lead generation. Because if you have more leads, you'd have more cash flow. If you have more cash flow, you could hire employees, and then you'd not be stuck in the business. You'd be working on the business instead of being a glorified employee. So if the very problem you're on this call to solve is the exact thing that's going to keep you from getting started and fixing the problem, you're in a self-perpetuating loop and you're stuck. Does that make sense? So the real question is not when is going to be the right time, because it's never going to feel like the right time. The real question is, when are you going to stop making decisions based out of a place of current circumstances and start making them out of a place of vision? Because if you keep making decisions based on current circumstances, you're going to get more what? The same circumstances. But when you start making decisions out of a place of future vision, you'll open yourself up to a new world of possibility. So who do you want to be? Somebody who's caught in that self-perpetuating loop, or somebody who recognizes that if not now, when? And somebody knows that if you start when it's hard, then when it gets easy, you're going to be a rocket ship, and absolutely it's going to be a breeze, okay? So this is very effective. And honestly, this kind of who do you want to be close is a very, very good close. Obviously not for like high-end B2B stuff oftentimes, but B2C, you would use this all the time. So I tried something similar and it didn't work. Okay, so this is one where truthfully, like, you really need to prevent this before you get to the end. And the way you prevent it before is really in discovery, okay? So a lot of these questions I'm going to suggest that you ask here would have originally been asked in discovery. But if you ever miss anything in discovery that ends up being an objection, oftentimes what you have to do is kind of go back into discovery, and then you come back, and then eventually you could rehandle the objection. But ideally, again, what you really want to be doing here is you totally already got through what they tried in the past and it didn't work, and then you positioned your solution later on as the simultaneous explanation of why everything they tried in the past has failed and why this is going to be different. And then that way, if they bring up something like this, you've already covered it and you can just reference back to it. But let's say for whatever reason, they drop a grenade on you, you had no idea, and you're like, what do I do? So the first line of attack is you go back in discovery, okay? What did you try in the past? What was like the method they were implementing, right? So like, let's say they've tried an agency in the past and it didn't work. Well, it really matters, like, what was the agency actually doing? Like if they had somebody, who was in roofing, using an agency, and they're like, yeah, do webinars. Okay, well, like, webinar, it's not that the agencies don't work or Facebook ads don't work. It's like, why were you doing a webinar when you're in roofing? I know that's an extreme example, but like the method matters. Even with like a health coach, well, what were they having you do? What was their methodology? And let's say it was like keto, and the person like lost a bunch of weight, then rebounded like crazy, as we know is very common with a ketogenic diet. So obviously like the method matters, and that opens up for an educational opportunity of how we can overcome that and kind of educate them of why that didn't work in the past and why that's going to be different. So that's why I said this creates a potential differentiation point, which is essentially what I'm already explaining. Now, I always ask, like, hey, so what would you have changed if you could? Like, what did you feel like was missing? That can give you another opportunity. This is a really, really great question that will just kind of help you get an angle every single time. It's like, it goes along the lines of it goes along the lines of essentially, look, so like we're often put in a place where, we're having to pick up the pieces after somebody who's really overpromised and delivered. And generally what we found is when people invest in stuff or invest in an agency, et cetera, and don't get the result, it's one of three things. It's either the methodology they were implementing was ineffective, like the roofing and the webinars example, or the methodology was great, but their execution or their support in terms of helping you implement that effectively just wasn't there. Or number three, it's like some way in which you showed up and you didn't actually put in the work. So which one of those three do you think it was, if not a combination of that? So what's really nice about this is if it's the method in your pitch, you differentiate the method. If it's the support, you dig in a little bit of that, see what was missing, and then emphasize the support or the execution in your pitch. If it's they didn't put in the work, then you further qualify, well, are you ready to put in the work, etc. A lot of times, they're not going to say this. They're going to give you one of these two, but it really helps here. And then all you would do here is you would just repitch. So you would just re-explain the offer while making these emphasis of differentiation points, okay? It's really going back and patching what you missed in the beginning. It's ideally handled in discovery. Now, let's just say, for example, that you do all of that and you're like, man, I've already did that. I tried to differentiate it. They're like not getting it. They can't comprehend it. They just will not move off of this thing. They're like really stuck on, I've been burned. Okay. So here, what you can do is just have an honest conversation. Be like, look, can I be honest with you? Right? I might not tell you what you want to hear, but I'm going to tell you what you need to hear. Is that fine? Okay, great. Well, look, I totally understand being apprehensive because you've been burned. And I've been burned tons of times with people who overpromise and underdeliver. So for instance, X, Y, and Z, X, Y, and Z, X, Y, and Z. Like for me especially, I got tons of stories of getting scammed and all sorts of stuff. Usually way worse than the people who actually have the objections. I've been scammed like you wouldn't even believe. And what I've learned is the real question about this is what lesson you're going to learn from the experience. You know, are you going to learn that because you tried something once and it didn't work, that you're never going to get help from anybody ever again? Or are you going to learn the lesson that that one bad decision is the tuition you pay to making a better and more informed decision the next time? So look, is there anything specifically keeping you from being less than 100% certain that this is what you need to get to the outcome? Because if not, let's not make one bad decision sabotage what's going to be a great decision, okay? So two options here. They gave you a specific thing, again, or if not, you can kind of pivot to, hey, it's a little bit of nerves. You go to the nerves close. We'll cover that later. Or you just reassure them a little bit and then pivot to the close, okay? Let's move on to the guarantee. So for what it's worth, the easiest way to handle this, obviously, is just to have a guarantee. If you can have a conditional guarantee, it's obviously ideal, oftentimes done smart. It's very little risk to your business, and it's just helps you close more deals. And the other thing is, too, is if you don't want to offer the conditional guarantee to everybody, you can actually just handle it or just offer it to people who only bring it up. And in that way, it only might get offered to 20% of your clients. And it's only for the people you add it to their contract who really are hell-bent on it. And that even eliminates your risk even more. Now, one thing I want to go to about this objection, is there a guarantee, is usually this is way overhandled. Okay, so I'm going to explain that in a little bit. So let's say they say, hey, is there a guarantee? Hey, we can definitely talk about that. Just curious, is there a reason you're asking that question? Are you asking that for a reason? All right. If there's any specific reason you're asking that question, something along those lines. The reason you want to ask this is basically sometimes you're going to get the I've been burned objection, which it's better to just pivot right into that and handle that. Or what happens is they're just curious, okay? And oftentimes, if they're just curious, if this is on their checklist of questions that they just ask every salesperson, then what happens is you can just handle this very quickly and move on, and it's not an issue. A lot of times, reps are like, oh my God, they go into objection mode. They take an innocent question and blow it way out of proportion, okay? So depending on what the response is, you would say, gotcha, well, I hear you and I appreciate that. Look, there's tons of stuff that's out of our control. For example, like, are you going to put in the work? Are you going to be able to generate the leads? So you just want to list stuff that's out of your control, okay? It's kind of offer specific, so I didn't say all of that. Right? So because of that, I can't guarantee any result, not to mention like me guaranteeing and claiming that you're going to get anything is illegal, immoral, and unethical anyways. Like that's against the law. So like I can't predict the future or promise you anything. What I can guarantee is we'll give you all the tools you need to get outcome. For instance, deliverable. And I can guarantee that, look, like we've had people just like you, like case study, who'll be able to use those tools to get the type of the results that you want. So again, I can't guarantee any sort of result, but what I can guarantee is we'll give you everything you need to succeed. What really matters is, number one, are you going to 100% show up and get to work? And number two, when you run into a problem, which you will, are you going to raise your hand when you need help? Okay, great. So if you are going to do that, you're going to be in a great place. But great question. What other questions do you have? Okay. So what I want to mention about this is, in a likely scenario, they've just been burned. So what actually happens is, and this is the reason we do this little question here, is you're going to end up sidestepping this completely and handling I've been burned. Okay? So that is oftentimes what happens. The other likely scenario is they're literally just, it's a checklist question. They're just asking an innocent question. In that case, when you temperature check in the beginning, which is again why you have to ask this question, you're asking that for a reason. If they're like, no, I'm just curious, okay, then you can basically, you could even get away with, no, we don't. But great question. What are the questions? That's how simple you could just handle that if it's just curiosity. So a lot of times it's either I've been burned or it's curiosity. If they're very hung up on the guarantee, then you would go through this whole language. But don't use this if it's not necessary. If it's just I've been burned, handle I've been burned. If it's just curious, just be like, no, we don't because there's too much out of our control. But that's a great question. What other questions do you have? And they're like, oh, okay. And it's just a thing on their checklist. They'll move on. All right. So, I put here like mini closers. They just way overhandle this. And again, if somebody's really hung up on it, you could hit them with this. Okay. So let's say they say, hey, it's too risky. Okay. This is not going to be a B2B thing. Oftentimes it's going to be a B2C thing. And oftentimes you're only going to get this type of objection if like you've already handled a few objections and there's been a lot of loops. Okay. So you would say, gotcha, I hear you on that. Now, can I share with you one of the biggest things that I've noticed between people who have tremendous success and the ones who keep going in circles? Well, look, like your goal is to make X, Y, and Z, right? Ultimately, X, Y, and Z per year. That would put you in the top 1% or 0.01% of people income earners in the world. Okay, so have you ever wondered why so few people make that amount of money? Well, it's because of the fear of risk. Okay, there's tons of people who say they want to make that, but there's far fewer who actually take the risk necessary to be the person who deserves that amount of success. So knowing that to be true, the real question is, do you want to be a part of the 99% of people who say those things, but their actions never align with their words because they're never willing to take the risk? Or you want to be a part of the 1% that actually, when they bump up to that glass wall of fear and that risk, they can break through it and expand and not contract? Which one of those two people do you want to be? So something along those lines, you can see that's a who you want to be close. Again, you're totally not going to use this unlike a high-end B2B prospect, okay? This is like really low prosumer audiences, health and fitness, dating, whatever, right? So now, one of my favorites, I'm just nervous, okay? So obviously, like, that goes with all of this stuff. Just use this ethically. Like, don't take grandma's last dollar, all right? Don't be putting anybody in a bad spot. And then this thing is obviously just a B2C thing. Again, like some of these B2B, it's really about getting them sold and then navigating logistics. It generally is not like you're dealing with risk, you're dealing with nerves, you're dealing with like massive reframes, stuff like that. But B2C, that's where it's at. That's the difference. So generally here, again, I've already alluded to this, but what happens is I'll feed them, hey, do you think it's a little bit of nerves? Because they'll kind of get stuck. All right. They'll be like, yeah, I just don't know. I don't know. I'll be like, look, like, do you just think it's a little bit of nerves? They'll be like, yeah. And then you go into this. Okay. So you'd say, gotcha. So, this is what you need. It's just a little bit of nerves then, right? And they're like, yeah, it's just a little bit of nerves. Then you say, good. And that's like the pattern interrupt. Okay. It's good that you're nervous. There's nerves for a reason. Those nerves are there for a reason, and they're a good thing. That means there's some weight to it, some meaning to it. Nothing ever great in this world was built by somebody who wasn't a little bit nervous at first. So being nervous is okay, but deep down in the pit of your stomach, you should know that despite the fear, that this is the right thing to do. And earlier when I asked you how you felt and asked you, like, do you feel like this is 100% what you need to be able to get to outcome? You mentioned this, what do you want to do, right? So like, who do you want to be? You want to be the type of person who gives into that fear, or the type of person who can feel the fear and do it anyways? Then let's get this started, okay? So that basically is how to handle that. I know that sounds a little flowery. It is a little bizoppy, but man, I close so many people with that. You have no idea. It actually worked really well, especially if you really get the tonality right. It's hard to manufacture kind of the feeling of when you would use something like that when you're in a one-sided training like this. So we're going to move on to support objections. Support means essentially they're deferring authority to, they want to talk to their spouse, their business partner. And really what happens is upward, equal, and downward authority. There's a little bit of nuances of how you handle each. Upward would be they got to talk to their boss or a board. Equal is usually partner spouse. And downward would be like, oh, I really want to do this. I want to speak with my team because my team is going to implement this. Okay. So little nuances in how you handle it. We'll start with partner and spouse. And in this framework's going to be, again, a little bit more B2C, but you'll get the B2B nuances that you need from it as well. Okay, so once we get this, we say, hey, So aside from letting your spouse know, is there anything else that's keeping you from being less than 100% certain that this is really what you want to do and this is 100% what you need to get to X, Y, and Z, right? Same exact tie down that we always do, okay? Then we say, if they say yes, we say, awesome. So just hypothetically, if your spouse is on this call and they're like, hey, Bob, I believe you and do whatever is best for your business, like whatever decision you want to make, I'm totally good with. If they had already given you that permission, would you be 100% moving forward and processing payment with me on this call right now? Okay, so you see how direct that is? Like I isolated, hey, just suppose that was already taken care of. Are you ready to go? Again, what I want to do is if there is any specifics at all, I don't go into spouse yet. I handle uncertainty first. Once uncertainty is done, I go into spouse. So then if they say yes, they're like, no, I'd be 100% in. I just really got to talk to my spouse. Cool. Totally get that. No problem. Now, just for clarity's sake, like, is this a respect thing to where you essentially made the decision you're going to do it? You're just kind of letting them know? Or, you're going to have like a real conversation and really collaborate on this. All right. So with here, this is a common question. If it's obvious of what their answer is going to be, you don't have to ask it. Okay. But you can ask it if you feel like it's not obvious. The rule of thumb here is anything that is not no, like, dude, I'm 100% moving forward. Like, just the way our account works, it would be totally weird if I just like gave this to you right now. So like, look, I'm going to give it a 5-minute call. Just let them know it's leaving an account. Don't worry about it. If unless you get something like that, just always assume that no, they got to like sit down and like talk about this. If it's business partners, generally they're going to sit down and talk about it. Right. So it's going to be one of those things. So almost always what's going to happen is, but for whatever, before I move on, for whatever reason, if it is somebody who's truly just letting them know, you could usually take like a refundable deposit or get them to call them right now or something. It's just very rare that happens. If this comes up, usually they really got to have a conversation, which means we move on to discovery. Now, unlike I've been burned in the past, this is discovery where generally you can do a little bit, but you're going to have to always do again at the end. Okay. So obviously this is framed as all spouse questions, but most of these can be used for business partner and also team, board, etc. And I'm going to actually go through some nuances at the end. But I'm always like, hey, what do you think she's going to think about this? Gotcha. What do you think she's going to think about the price? Gotcha. Is she supportive of you growing your business, starting a new business, losing weight, whatever it is? Like, are you guys on the same page about that? What if she says no? That's one where like I really, depending on what they say there, I really want to do some coaching, because you might even talk about, well, like, look, like, how do you think your relationship's going to be if this resentment builds of her not letting you do the things that you really want to do and to really fulfill your purpose? So like, if you're not going to address this now, when are you going to address this? Because it's really not becoming just a business thing. It's a marriage thing. There's all sorts of things that you can do there with this question. I always ask this in almost every situation. It's very, very good. You should know if they're involved in the business. Do they know about us? Do they know you're on this call? What would they think if they knew you're on this call? You don't have to obviously ask all of these. Like, I would never ask all of these. Usually I'm asking like 3 to 4 and I can kind of just get a feel for it from there. Okay. Now, generally, if it's a business partner, any of these 3 situations, business partner, spouse, or upward authority, meaning they're going to talk to their boss, what we need to do is we need to coach them on how to have the conversation. Okay. Now, there's 2 outcomes of them having the conversation. If you feel like they can sell them on the thing, then let them have the conversation. You book the follow-up with them. If you feel like there's no way this person can sell this person on it, then you need them to have the conversation to not sell the program, but sell the meeting with you. So generally, like a spouse, most times you need to really bank on the spouse to make the sale for you. You can add them to the call, but most times you're going to bank on them to make the sale for you. If it's a boss, it depends on the quality of the executive, but a lot of times I'm like, hey, bring your boss back and we'll have to re-go back through everything. But sometimes I've had people who, I can ask the question of like, hey, generally when you take things to your boss, how does that conversation go? And usually like what happens from there? Like how, basically from you getting a presentation to your boss, like, hey, you really want to do this, right? So let me know so I can help you. What is generally when you take this to your boss, what does the process look like from there to a signed contract and getting paid? And they'll just tell you. And oftentimes they're like, yeah, he's going to be totally fine with it. He'll just tell me, he'll give me authority to use the card, etc. Or, who knows what they're going to actually bring up, and maybe we need to bring that person on the call. So it's generally one of those two things. Now, I want to give you the spouse one. If, like, let's say this guy is going to go talk to his wife. So we're going to say, great. So look, I definitely want you to talk to your spouse, but I want to remind you there's two ways you can go about this. It could be a conversation where you go to your partner and you say, hey, that business of mine that I spent a ton of money on and it's only caused us a lot of stress and constant ups and downs and all this stuff. Well, look, I met a guy on the internet who might be able to help, and it's like $7,000. And what do you think? Here's all the details. It's like a joke, okay? Or it can be a conversation where you sit down and confidently tell her, like, hey, babe, I know that the business I wanted to start and my business in general has kind of just not been what I've always promised it could be, and I really haven't been committed to it at the level I should. And I know you've been, despite that, really good at supporting me every step of the way. I want to let you know that I'm going to fix that starting now. I've decided and committed to grow this where it should be already. I found somebody to help me get there and an amazing coach. And I'm really asking for your emotional support and buy-in to this decision I've already made, because this is extremely important to me. And I need to do this for us, but I want to have a serious conversation between me and you so we're aligned on that before I move forward. Okay? So I just kind of riffed that off the cuff. But the point is, you need to give the person a clear contrast of the wimpy version, which is generally what most people do, believe it or not, because when they're talking with you, they're very confident and they're like, yeah, I'm going to bring it up. Oh, yeah. And then they don't even think about, man, how am I going to present this to my wife or whoever? And then they just get wrecked. Okay? So you need to really let them know, like, look, it's going to be a tough conversation. Like, you got to saddle up and go to war here a lot of times. So, and then you can end this whole framework by saying, now let me ask you, which one of those two guys do you think is going to convince his wife? He's like, obviously the second one. Okay, great. Because obviously if you're not certain about this, she's not going to be neither, nor should she be, because you're uncertain and you're the direction and leader as a man. So the real question is, when you go to talk to that spouse, which one of those two are you going to be? Are you sure? Because if there's anything else that's going to keep you from being less than 100% certain that you want to do this, let's cover that, because I need you to go into this conversation 100% certain, right? So now moving on from this, obviously, you're not going to do this sort of thing hey, there's two ways you could go to your board. You could go to your board like a complete wimp, or you're not going to do that for that. Even with a business partner, unless it's a toxic relationship where you have and this happens, where you have somebody who's just totally not on board and not on the same page as one business partner, and that business partner is totally complaining. And then you have another person who they really want the lead generation fixed. Sometimes you got to coach those people. That's tough. Generally, you're going to use something like this for the spouse, okay? It's a little bit more B2C, but it gives you an idea of, again, you need to create a champion and then coach them on how to have the conversation with whoever they got to have the conversation of. And remember, there's two outcomes. You coach them on how to set the meeting with you, or coach them how to actually get permission for the sale, okay? What you pick is going to depend on the belief you have in that champion. So now, few caveats. So for boards, any type of upward mobility where it's a boss or a board, just so you know, there's generally an investment amount that's okay to where anything above that investment amount needs approved. So what you can actually do, and this is such an easy way to close this without it going on to a 3-week process, is you just figure out what that is, do a refundable deposit for that amount, get them started. Then they can work on the next week or two to get board approval. And honestly, once an object is in motion, it usually stays in motion. They'll almost never refund. So that's a very, very good way to do that. And then, if instead of refunding too, if they don't get approval, you could just give them some SOPs or some training, and then they can, that can be what they got for the $4,000 or whatever their threshold was. The other thing with boards is, again, it's similar to what I already talked about. You really want to just get somebody 100% sold. It's much easier to get somebody 100% sold when it's not their money, by the way. So get them 100% sold, make them their champion, and then you got to just go through this A and B framework. If it's a boss, it's usually generally best for you to get involved and them to get on the call. If it's a board, they can usually sell the board if they're the CEO. Now, if it's downward authority, this is a tricky one, because you'll sleep on this thinking that, they'll be able to convince their team works for them. You'd be surprised. Sometimes their team just throws grenades into everything, and they have a bad team. That's why they need help. So if it's downward authority, the big question to ask is, what if they say no? What if they say they don't have the bandwidth? What if they say, we can just do this ourselves? What if they say, I don't think this should be a priority right now? Because oftentimes that's exactly what they're going to say. And what we really want to do is ask these questions, start prodding, and then actually have kind of the come to Jesus that look like, if you believe this is the number one constraint in your business, your job as CEO is to determine what the problem is, what the priority is, what the vision is, and align everybody to attack that. You shouldn't really be going to them and asking for permission. Now, if you want to do that just to get them bought in, I understand that. That's fine. But if they say no, are you prepared to tell them, no, guys, like, we are doing this? I'm not asking you for permission. I'm asking you for buy-in. So you would be surprised how often, because a lot of times when they go to their team that's going to be implementing, the team will see it as an attack on how they're currently doing their job. The team's already really busy, has too many priorities. And the team's like, oh my gosh, this is another thing they're piling on my plate. They don't think I'm doing a good job. Oh, what if this outside consultant comes in and fires me? There's all sorts of things that they're going to like delay and be like, oh no, we can just do it. No, they can't. You'd already done it. It's just like, so it's kind of ridiculous. But I'm telling you, these objections kill deals because like they don't seem like, you would think that the business owner would just have a sack and like just do it, but they don't. Okay, financial objections. So this is really anything from I can't afford it, it's too expensive, I can't make this work, I'll make it work financially in 2 months. Any financial objection, we handle it the same. Okay. So again, you say, hey, no problem, money and everything aside, do you 100% want to do this? Like, do you feel like this is what you need to get the outcome? Same thing as always. So money aside, you're 100% in. Same thing as same thing as always. We want to look for the specific objection, or like if they're hesitating, tonality, wishy-washiness, we call it out. If it's just the money, which a lot of times with this one, we'll isolate it, we'll get the double tied on it's just the money. Then we proceed and we'll say, hey, look, so most of our clients do it up front. For certain clients, depending on the situation, we break it up. So look, are you open to having an honest conversation financially, getting everything on the table so we can see if there's a way to make this work now, or at the very least, we'll work towards this in the future. Does that sound good? Okay. They say, yeah, that's fine. Got it. So, and then we get these three data points. Hey, what's your net incoming cash in the next 30 days? Okay. What's your cash on hand right now exactly? And what about credit and access to credit? Now, when you ask this, here's what's key. If you make it weird, it's going to be weird. If you don't make it weird, it's not going to be weird. All right. The reason it's not going to be weird is because by the time you get to this call, there's been 1, 2, 3 times they've told you they 100% want to do it. They just don't know how to make it work financially. You offered to help them make it work financially so that they can do something they 100% want to do. There should be no friction here. And also in the solution, if you pitch that how I teach, of course, they've already told you that sounds perfect too. So they told you they want to do this like 5 times up until this point and that they need help. So if you don't make it weird, it's really you're just helping them. Now, with cash on hand, sometimes what you have to do is you're going to say, hey, what's your cash on hand right now? They're going to say 1K. That's not their cash on hand. So always say, hey, I'm not asking what you can spend right now. I don't even know if you could do this right now. This might not be something you could do. But what I am asking is like, what's actually available? Because even if we can't do something now, I want to make sure you can work towards, you have a game plan to work towards this in the future. Because when you say cash on hand, what I'm referring to is what's in your checking account. What I'm not referring to is how much you can spend right now. Okay. So this is very key that they tell you this, just quite frankly, and then credit and all this other stuff. If you don't make it weird, it won't be weird. Believe me, I've used this probably 300, 400, 500 times. I mean, I'm not even kidding. Maybe even more than that. I've used it so many times. If you count my sales team, thousands of times, thousands and thousands. Now, once we get all the numbers, then we say, hey, and you really want to do this, right? Because obviously at this point, like, I want to make sure they really want to do it before I close them, because I'm going to close them. And they say, yes. Okay, well, look, like, I don't think the best thing for you is to do this all up front. If that's going to like zero you out or put you in a financially bad spot. I also don't think the best thing for you, based on what we talked about earlier, is to do nothing. So what I'd be willing to do for you is let you come in for blank down. That way you can come in, get X result, Y result, and Z result. And then that way, when the next payment comes around 30 days down the line, you already have tons of momentum, and it's really at that point just becoming an afterthought. So if I'm willing to do that for you, are you willing to move forward right now? Okay, that's the framework. So again, it's not weird unless you make it weird. If you get resistance, like they won't tell you their finances, they never really wanted to do it in the first place, they're not sold. Okay, so you ended up, the reason you got to that place and that happened is your tie downs were weak. If your tie downs are very strong, they would have actually given you a real specific objection and concern. But likely you blew the call way long ago. Big thing with financial objections. Don't ask, okay, well, like what payment can you do? okay? You need to lead them, not the other way around. The only way you can lead them is knowing what actually their financial situation looks like, which is why you have to ask those questions. It's very, very key. Yeah, and generally when you offer a payment plan, go to the highest thing that you think they can do and always know you can do one lower, okay? Generally, when I offer the first thing, I almost think they're probably not going to be able to do it, and then I'll offer the next one lower, but that will keep your cash collection up. And then here's the final thing is always make sure when you offer something, you get something in return. So if I'm going to change my terms to a 2-pay, I want to get a decision now. That's why I say, hey, I'm willing to do that for you. Are you willing to move forward right now? I'm trading better terms for a decision right now. Let's say they say no, we go back and forth, and I have to go to a 3-pay later. Instead of just being like, well, what about a 3-pay? I'll be like, hey, if I'm willing to do that for you, will you move forward right now and give me a case study when you get amazing results? So you see how like when I ask for something in return, whatever I'm giving to them has more value. That's it for this training, guys. I'll see you in the next training.